Okay, so I'm going to talk today about some of the things that CEOs sometimes do if they want to avoid those awkward conversations that they really don't want the board to focus on, and perhaps a few things that boards can do about it if they see this happening. Okay, well, and first of all, can I thank you for the invitation to do this? It's a great pleasure. I would like to say this is. I'm going to say some sort of provocative and cheeky things in this. This is a bit of fun. As they say, any resemblance to any people, real people, are purely coincidental. But obviously, if the cap fits, then well, we'll come to that later. And you've introduced me. I should just say the phone co-op is it's now part of the Mid Counties Co-op, but it started off as a separate business. So I am a non-exec board member of the Mid Counties Co-op, which is a £1 billion business with all kinds of different interests as was described. Okay, so why is it important to spot these tactics? You know, it's the job of boards to hold management to account. That's a kind of nostrum almost. But there are probably some areas that they don't want to talk about. A typical CEO, anyone running a business, in fact, anyone in any job, probably doesn't want to talk about certain areas. Now, they might be intractable problems that really nobody wants to talk about. For example, are we in a market that's in long-term decline? What are we going to do about that? Are our competitors a challenge we don't know how to face? There may be issues that they hope they can fix before anyone notices, or that perhaps other successes will outshine those problems. Or they may just hope that they can make it to retirement before anyone looks too closely. And they certainly won't want any metrics linked to these tricky areas that in any kind of performance measures that could affect their bonuses. So this session is really about describing and talking about some of the tactics people use to avoid that scrutiny. Okay, what I would also say is this is not an instruction manual for. If you see that if you recognize that you're doing some of these things, if you're a CEO yourself, please stop and don't take these ideas away and actually use them. Okay, so the first thing I would say, a first tactic that CEOs often use is get people to talk about something else, get them to focus on something that's really quite important and maybe very engaging. The directors will find it hard to argue that they shouldn't be talking about this because it really is important. It's just maybe not the most important thing to talk about. Second tactic, a well-known one, unfortunately, is divide and rule. So find a complex and important issue that the CEO knows will divide the directors because they have different views on it. If they're very Machiavellian, they might even recruit people to set that up in the first place. This means the directors will spend a huge amount of energy disagreeing with each other rather than focusing on that difficult topic they don't want discussed. And you know, the more division, the better, really, if the CEO's following this strategy, because they can then present themselves as the kind of wise and calm person who will facilitate a resolution of this conflict. But that's already taken probably quite a long time and a lot of energy as well. And you know, this division could even be embedded more deeply, because you can start the discussion as being one about the organization's culture in a way that you actually end up with factions developing in the board, and those factions will then that will result in the board effectively focusing on board members will focus on what the other faction is doing rather than on the topics that really need talking about. And you know, factions are not unusual in organizations, and they can be manipulated by a bad CEO. Another thing, perhaps more, on the surface more benign, is that a CEO can bring up really fascinating subjects for the board to focus on. Really intellectually challenging, interesting topics that they can get engaged with, and they'll enjoy the discussion. And while they're enjoying that discussion, they're not talking about the things that you don't want them to talk about. And this is a perfect example for directors to be able to demonstrate their, how clever they are, and maybe to compete with each other for the attention of other directors of the management, and this can be very effective. Sort of linked to this is flattery, and that's usually a pretty effective tactic. So tell them outside the boardroom, not in the board meeting so much, although you could do it there, how much you value their personal knowledge on a particular topic, and get them engaged in working on some problem related to that. That will get them focused on the idea that they're bringing value themselves, and that won't put them in the frame of mind to challenge on other things. Now, this is a very unkind one if it's taken to its to the full extent. And you could ask a key director, if you think one of the directors is likely to home in on your unwanted topic, you could give them a job to do representing the organization externally, speaking at an important conference, for example, representing the organization. Whilst they're busy focusing on their own profile and how they're representing the organization, they're probably less likely to pay attention to the things that you don't want them to pay attention to. And if you want to be really unkind, you could get someone in the audience to ask several awkward questions that might put them in a poor light or threaten to do so. And then you can step in and rescue them, and they'll be eternally grateful to you. And you'll kind of have established a dynamic in which they have your patronage, which of course is not the way that boards should work, but it often is. Another thing you could do is you could suggest that that the governance, that they've crossed a line between governance and management, that this is really a management issue if they bring up these kinds of topics. And this may well put them on the defensive. It's often easy to make the case that just about anything is either a management matter or a governance matter, because most of them cross the line. And in a way, that's not the issue. The issue is which aspects of it are governance matters and which are management matters. And it's but if you can direct them away from that, you'll probably be able to put them on the back foot. And if they press the case, you can make some small concessions without agreeing to a full discussion, and hope that they give up after a while. And if you really want to scare them, you could get the chief personnel officer to have a quiet word with them, suggesting that if they intervene too much in governance area, in management areas, that could be very awkward later on if there was any kind of dispute with the CEO, and that it's a bad idea for them to push in this area. Now, again, you could also suggest that, or you could arrange for someone to suggest that a governance review should be conducted. This will put all of the directors into a position where they're feeling perhaps a little bit threatened. Maybe this review is going to result in their departure or some change that they won't like. And while that's hanging over their heads, they're not likely to challenge you too much in case that results in them being put at disadvantage. Another thing, the eighth tactic that's sometimes used is that usually directors have a particular topic that they or several topics that they really want the organization to focus on. They've got an agenda, they've got things they want to see happen. So you can start to hold out the prospect that these things are going to be addressed, and that you're going to move forward on some of those things. And while they're looking at that, they probably won't want to put that at risk by getting into a conflict. I think it was a Roman emperor who originally said, if you're in crisis, reorganize. But it's certainly a tactic that can take people's attention away from what you don't want them to focus on. So you could identify, for example, a major acquisition or restructuring opportunity, ideally something that has to be completed within a period of time, so that everyone's focus is on that, and you can kick these other discussions that you don't want into the long grass. It may well be that you don't ever intend to do this transaction, but it nevertheless is a way of keeping a discussion away. And then finally, you'll probably be involved as CEO together with the secretary in planning the agenda. And if you make sure that all the topics that you want discussed are near the top of the agenda, it's quite likely that by the time you get to the end of the meeting, the other topics will have dropped off or won't get so much focus. And you can even insist that the topics you want near the top of the agenda have to be there because certain people's attendance is required and they can only be there at the beginning, or some similar tactic. So what do you do about these things if you see these things happening? I think, in my experience, the most powerful thing that a board of non-execs can do is focus on the vision for the organization and where you want to be quite a way into the future, beyond the normal planning horizon of most organizations, 10 years time, for example, maybe longer. And everything that follows from that, the strategy, should be linked to that. It's how do we get there? So you put the focus, you set the big picture. Many boards don't do that. They focus on shorter term strategies and business plans. Separate out what's urgent and what's important, and actually get those things documented. So the things that the CEO doesn't want to talk about may well come into the category of urgent and important, or important but not urgent. And what the CEO may be bringing to the alternative topics that they may be wanting you to focus on will perhaps also be not urgent or not as urgent. So it's about making sure that you've identified these topics that do need discussion and getting them onto the agenda. Don't work on your own. So it's important for directors to support each other. Actually, make contact with them outside of board meetings, meet them for dinner, have a phone conversation, find out what they think. And if you can see that they also recognize these Machiavellian tactics, then support each other in challenging them and working out the most effective way to do that. And I think another thing is, think about the culture of the organization. It might be that the board is partly to blame for the CEO avoiding certain topics. You may have set a fairly short-termist culture in which that is the obvious thing for them to do if they want to survive. It's not your role as non-execs to hound the CEO. Some of these issues are actually tough and need the board's support, and they need you to work together with the CEO as a team to address them. So there has to be enough trust between the different people in the boardroom to ensure that everyone feels they're on the same side, and you can talk about these complex and difficult issues. I think another thing to say is that all employees probably at times want to focus the discussions with their manager on the things that they think are going to show them in a good light. And of course, on paper, the CEOs also report to the board, and that's kind of the chair is their line manager and so forth. But in reality, you only have to read the financial press to recognize that they're often more powerful than the board that they're supposed to be reporting to, and effectively control it. And I think one of the key aims of corporate governance is to avoid too much concentration of power in the hands of one person, and to ensure that accountability to the ultimate owners and other stakeholders is properly exercised. And another key aim is to ensure that where there is power, it's not abused.